and welcome to part 2 of a 3-part series about Morel Dunes. In today's show, I'm going to be telling a really interesting story about how the magnificent Morel Dunes started their development around 300 years ago. And my story begins with a huge earthquake that occurred here in 1700. Oh, and this earthquake, it was so big that geologists refer to it as a megaquake. Oh no, not again! Oh, I shouldn't have said that word. Okay, I'm getting a little tired of the earthquake thing. Can we make that our last one?
Are you kidding? I love the earthquake bit. I want to figure out more ways to get into the show. The camera's rolling, so keep going on with your story.
So, continue with my story. So, geologists are still trying to piece together what exactly occurred here during and after that after that geologic seismic event that occurred here in 1700. One thing they believe happened is that the land subsided very rapidly from 4 to 6 feet. Can you imagine that? I can't even conceive of it. Now, one discovery that really puzzled the geologists was they found these areas of charcoal from burned wood, and it appeared there had been a big wildfire here in the early 1700s. That's really odd because this forest is generally cool enough and wet enough that wildfires do not occur here. So they came up with a really interesting theory. And that is, right after the big earthquake, a giant tsunami was generated in the ocean right offshore here. That tsunami rolled in, knocked down quite a few of the trees here, and then all those trees, they dried out and they became a vast field of firewood. Well, along came a particularly dry summer, lightning, and poof, you got a raging wildfire. Can you imagine, first of all, this area gets slammed by an earthquake, then a tsunami, and then after that, a raging wildfire. I would almost venture to call it a megafire. I shouldn't have called it a megafire. So to explain how the Morel Dunes emerged from all that geologic drama, I need to next head down to the beach because that's where the Morel Dunes were first born around 300 years ago. And I chose to access the beach from Morel Dunes South because the beach is a lot closer from the parking lot trailhead here. It's only about a 10-minute walk or even less. So what do you say? We head down to the beach. Okay, so the theory goes that when the Morel area dropped by 4 to 6 feet in 1700, that subsidence extended right here to this very beach. And this beach then became mostly submerged. Well, over time, the longshore ocean currents carried in sand here, and within a few decades or so after 1700, there was a lot of sand around here. In fact, it would be 4 to 6 feet of the newer sand on top of the older beach. And around 300 years ago, all that sand began its journey inland. But, you know, before I get to that part of the story, it is a beautiful day out here. Let's take a look around. Enough of the sightseeing, back to the story. So I left off with that unusually large accumulation of sand that would have been here around 300 years ago. Well, the prevailing winds here, they come off of the ocean. So all that sand started blowing inland. And as it was blown inland, it started creating sand dunes. And those sand dunes started getting bigger and bigger, 40 feet, 60 feet, 80 feet tall. And as the wind kept blowing those large dunes inland, they were headed directly for that sweet little forest that I rode my bike through earlier. And to continue with the story, I now need to head to the precise point where these advancing sand dunes meet the forest. And keep in mind that most of what I've been talking to up to this point has been geologic theory. Well, once we get to the next part of this story, I'll be able to see how the story is being played out right in front of our eyes. And what an interesting story it is. Let's go! Ah, here we are. Okay, this is the point where the sand dunes are encountering the forest. Now keep in mind, the sand dunes are less than 300 years old. The forest on the other side was established on dunes that were much older, around 6,000 or 7,000 years ago. And we're going to go to another area where I can show you a little more clearly what is happening as these younger dunes are spilling into this much older forest. Ah, here we are. Okay. Now these sand dunes are estimated to be advancing inland at the rate of about 3 to 10 feet every year, depending on how much wind there is in that year. And as they are advancing, they are slowly covering up this older forest. And as they do so, they actually smother the plants, and those plants die. Well, not only the ground plants die, but also as the trees get buried deeper and deeper, the trees eventually die until all that's left are their kind of ghostly tops sticking up through the top of the sand dunes. Now, these sand dunes will eventually cover up this forest, and they will keep advancing until they reach Humboldt Bay. In fact, there are some areas that are within 30 or 40, 50, 60 feet of Humboldt Bay. Let me go show you that. Well, I hope the story about how those sand dunes are burying this forest doesn't seem too sad, but you got to keep in mind these sort of geologic stories often play out in cycles. And those cycles seem really vast from our human perspective of time. Eventually, those sand dunes will weather down from wind and other erosion, and forest just like this one, real close to it, will probably reestablish itself here. And who knows, another 6,000 or 7,000 years after that happens, another earthquake will come along and start the cycle all over again. No one really knows for certain, but one thing we can be certain of, and that is right now we can come out here and gaze in wonder at how the dramatic geologic story has all come together at this very point in time to create the beauty and the grandeur of the Mallel.